What do they want to achieve? I think it's absolutely essential that you put yourself into the shoes of the person who's giving you the money or the organisation that's offering the money. And I find that a lot of the times groups are just so passionate about their projects and about their organisation and about their community, which is great, but sometimes we need to take a step back and we need to think about the organisation that is giving us their money. What are they trying to achieve and what are their goals by giving this money away? So we can have a look at obvious motivations. So obvious motivations can be found in the grant guidelines, which Lavinia spoke about earlier this morning. And I think the grant guidelines are really good because usually there's a sentence right up front that talks about the objectives of this funding program are. The aim of this funding project is. That's a really good place to start, and certainly having a look at the grant guidelines can give you some really good information. Another place where you can have a look is the corporate plan of the organisation that you are applying to. So I have, as an example, put the Western Downs Regional Council corporate plan on the table in front of you. So many people, when they hear corporate plan, think, oh my gosh, documents and pages and a massive thing that I'm going to have to trawl through. What we actually see these days is a lot of organisations moving towards a single page strategic plan or corporate plan, very clear, very concise, easy to consume and understand. So the reason I'm giving you the council strategic plan is because if any of you have applied for a council grant before, you will know one of the questions is, how does this project contribute to an active and vibrant community? Now, if you were to read that question with no background knowledge, there could be many responses to it. How do you define vibrant? How do you interpret active? But if you look at the corporate plan, in the dark green box, the heading is active, vibrant communities. And underneath it, it lists all the things that council believes contributes to an active, vibrant community. So by having a look at the corporate plan, you can very clearly see what they're looking for when they want you to respond to that question. So never underestimate a corporate plan, and don't be afraid to have a look for them either. They all have them available, or more often than not, they have them available on their websites. Okay, so the other thing that we can consider when we're thinking about who is giving us the money are some less obvious motivations. So less obvious motivations can be value for money. Will my project offer value for money? They want to get maximum efficiency and effectiveness with the money that they're handing out. They want to be able to spread it as far as they can to benefit as many people as they can. So when you're asking them for money, thinking about, is this going to be value for money? For example, let's think about a lawnmower. You might be getting a mower for your community group. Now, it's better value for money if that mower is being used by 3 community groups, maybe at the same facility, maybe at the grounds next door, but that's better value for money for the person who's providing the funding, because that allows them to offer that benefit to more groups. Another less obvious motivation can be positive branding. So, and we see this quite a little bit with banks and insurance companies. So they will have a national grant program, but when you look a little bit closer at who they are funding or where the programs are being funded, it can commonly be in places where they have branches or offices or lots of members. And that's because by putting money into that community, they're creating a positive brand so people continue to go to their offices, keep their membership, visit those branches. So think about branding for the organisation as well. And the last, less obvious motivation is reach versus impact. Have a look at the grant. Is this a reach grant or is this an impact grant? So an example that I've been using is you're hosting an event for 25 young people at the local high school, which is a workshop for them to learn some resilience and good mental health skills. In that particular instance, it would probably be better to think about an impact grant. So one that's focusing on early intervention or about resilience and health and well-being and mental health, maybe in young people or in the wider community, rather than a reach grant, which might be an events program. Because a traditional events program is probably looking for more reach across the entire community rather than 25 people. Have a look at the funding body. Where do they sit? Is it a local grant? Is it a state grant? Is it a federal grant? Where is the assessment panel? Then use data and supporting documents that match that funding body. So for example, if you're looking for some data in your local town about unemployment rates, if you're applying to a federal body, compare the unemployment rate here to the Australian national averages. Also, when you're thinking about your letters of support and attaching documents, make it relevant to the funding body. If you're applying for a federal grant, look for a letter of support from David Littleproud's office as our federal member. And then paint a picture which helps them understand who you are in a way that makes sense to them. I don't think that it's unreasonable to think that somebody who doesn't live locally, sitting in Brisbane, sitting in Sydney or Melbourne, that they don't know where Miles is. That's not unreasonable. But when I'm writing the grant application, I'm trying to paint them a picture so they can visualise it in their head and they can really understand where I am and who I am. So an example that I use is if I'm doing a local grant application, I would talk about Miles and District. We're located in the Miles and District. For a state grant, I would write that the project will occur in Miles, which is 2.5 hours west of Toowoomba. Okay, if I'm sitting in Brisbane, I understand where Toowoomba is and I can visualise 2.5 hours west. For a federal grant, I would write Miles, which is 4.5 hours west of Brisbane. Okay, if I'm sitting in Sydney or Melbourne, I understand where Brisbane is and I can kind of figure out where you are on the map from there. So just thinking about your audience and writing for the person who's going to be reading the application. Okay, hot tip. There's another one which I will mention after this one, but this was the one that I've done a slide for. Print the guidelines. I do this with every grant application that I do. I print the guidelines, I get a highlighter, and I highlight the words or phrases that really stand out to me about who they are and what they are trying to achieve. And then that sits next to me when I'm typing up my responses, because it really helps to keep me on task that what I'm writing is what is important to them and that I'm focusing on the parts of my project that are important to them as well. The other hot tip that I would say is that if you are unsure, call them. They're actually very happy for you to call them and say, I've had a look at your the grant that you have available. I have this kind of project. What do you think? Can you give me some thoughts? Does this align with what you're trying to achieve and things like that? It is okay to pick up the phone and ask those questions.